Well, we all grow up with heroes or idols, don't we? Whether that's your favorite footballer, your favorite musician, or your favorite vlogger, we all have heroes that we have looked up to. And the Corinthian culture was no different. However, they took this to a whole new level. They would spend their lives looking up to and idolizing these particularly gifted speakers, and they would hang on to their every word. And at the start of this chapter, you might remember the Apostle Paul rebuking the Corinthians, effectively telling them to grow up. And part of the reason he rebuked these Corinthian believers was that they had fallen prey to the mindset of their culture, which elevated humans so much that they were almost placed to God-like status. But now the Corinthian Christians were doing the exact same thing, but it gets even worse. They weren't just doing it with their secular leaders, putting them on a pedestal, but they were doing it with their Christian leaders. They were doing it with people like the Apostle Paul. Some would say, Paul is the man, we should follow him, we should give our undying allegiance to him. Others were saying it about people like Apollos, the pastor of the church. But look how the Apostle Paul responds in verses 5 through to 9 of chapter 3. He says this, "What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labour. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's fields, God's building." As these believers tend to put Paul on a pedestal and Apollos on a pedestal, look what Paul asks in verse 5. He says, "What's Paul? Or what's Apollos?" Then he immediately answers his own question, servants. We are simply servants. That's a very humble title for Paul to give himself. He says we are effectively simply the ones who planted and watered, but the work was done by whom? Look at verse 6. The real work was done by God. He's the one who gave the growth. You know, that should challenge all of us in two ways. Firstly, it should challenge us in our following, and secondly, it should challenge us in our leading. Firstly, it should challenge us in our following. Isn't this something we can be guilty of? Putting people, humans, on a pedestal? You know, we live in the world of the celebrity pastor, where we perhaps measure the legitimacy of what someone says based on the number of followers they have on Twitter or the number of books that they've written. In fact, sometimes we can maybe even be critical of our own pastors or leaders because we compare them to others that we see online. Yet Paul says everyone engaged in the work of gospel ministry is on a level playing field. They are all, verse 7, nothing, but, verse 5, servants of the Most High God. We're all servants. How does that challenge you in your following? But secondly, how does it challenge you in your leading? Regardless of what position of authority you hold, no matter what position of leadership you hold, whether you're a youth club leader, a small group leader, a Sunday school teacher, a camp leader, a pastor, an elder, whatever the case may be, we are ultimately nothing more, Paul says, than servants of God. He's the one who provides the growth. And so let that firstly humble you, but let it also encourage you. That relieves the pressure, doesn't it? God is the one who provides the growth. My job is simply to be humble and to be faithful. Hope you have a good day.